Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we're going to be talking about a new organization called Rise to Run. And joining me tonight is Pujitha Tanjore, who is the Pilot Hub Coordinator for Virginia. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Catherine.
So we were introduced by a mutual friend. Stair Calhoun was like, you have to meet Pooja.
Yes.
Because she is awesome and she is very involved in this new organization called Rise to Run.
Yep.
And explain a little bit about, first of all, how you came to be interested in the issue of women in politics. Because Rise to Run is about recruiting and engaging high school and college age progressive young women to become engaged in our political system. But how did you originally become interested in our political system?
Yeah, so the primary premise behind me being involved with women's rights came from my great-grandmother. And sometimes I feel like a broken record telling this story, but when you're passionate about something, you talk about it a lot. So when I found out that my great-grandmother was married off into a child marriage, I didn't really know what that meant for her fate. When I was younger, it just meant that, you know, my great-grandfather had passed away, but my great-grandmother was young enough to still be alive, and she is still alive, knock on wood. But as I got older, I saw the repercussions of what that meant. And really, what it came down to was her destiny had been decided for her. And that didn't seem fair to me. I have this amazing opportunity to live in the United States, to live in Loudoun County, to be part of one of the richest counties in the nation, to get an education. I get to decide my destiny for myself. And that isn't something that she had. And that appalled me. And I grew really, really frustrated with that. But I didn't necessarily know how to act on it. So when I was 8 to 9 years old, I was really just struggling with anger and this pent-up frustration with the world and how things worked, and how so many people have, just like my great-grandmother, had their fate decided for them. The intersection between that anger and politics came when I was younger from a sort of unusual story. My mother can attest to this, but when I was younger, there was this brand of Indian noodles called Maggie. And anyone watching this from my family will laugh right now, but I was completely obsessed with this brand of noodles. It was essentially all that I ever wanted to eat and all that I would eat. And as an only child, my parents just cared so much for me that they didn't mind sort of giving into that. And so when one day my mom came home and she said, no more. No more of this, no more eating Maggie. You can't do it anymore. It's unhealthy. The calories are empty and it's worth nothing. I obviously didn't agree with her. I thought the taste of masala and salt was more than enough for me. And so when she told me this and banned Maggie from the household, I walked around my neighborhood and I picked up popsicle sticks and old art projects because now it was summer. And my friends and I staged a coup, to say the least. We sort of came into the house with these like very tiny little signs, and old cardboard and poster board, and marched around the house until my parents agreed to make us all Maggie. And that was when I really saw this activist fire, this ability to create individual change happen. In that moment, I knew that my life would be a series of finding popsicle sticks and collecting the kids around the neighborhood and makeshift making posters until we got what we wanted.
That was your first project organizing people in order to accomplish something specific and defined, which is I'm protesting the fact that I have no access to Maggie noodles.
Yes.
So that's not all that long ago, because I have failed to mention that you're 16.
Yes.
And you're a junior at Rock Ridge High School in Ashburn. So it seems like, from your perspective, you've probably been at this a long time, like half your life, right? I've been at this half my life, but still 16 is fairly young to be acknowledged as a leader, not just with Rise to Run, but certainly among the women of Network Nova, who have included you in the upcoming Women's Summit, because people are very impressed by your ability to articulate, to organize, and to lead. So how did you end up connecting, so going from the noodle story through school, how did you end up on this leadership track?
So on a whim, I had never expected to go into politics. So this is largely part of the culture in Northern Virginia is Thomas Jefferson High School. They're amazing. I actually work with a lovely young lady from there. And so in preparing to apply to Thomas Jefferson High School in 7th grade, so over the summer we were taking the tests and practicing exams, my parents had on a whim mentioned to me that I should apply to this program called the Summer Enrichment Program at the University of Virginia. On a whim, I wrote an essay. I wrote about the terribleness of the No Child Left Behind policy, and I just attacked standardized testing with all that I had in me. Just on a whim, I'd never really done anything fully involved at that point with politics, and I submitted this essay, and I got accepted into the program. I didn't know where to go from there. We had to pick classes, so I picked mock Senate and law. So I spent my mornings in mock Senate, and this was prior to Bernie Sanders announcing that he was running for president. But this was the same year that gay marriage got legalized. It actually got legalized during the program when we had no access to internet. So that was fun to hear about. But I got assigned to play Bernie Sanders. So I was attacking this very different policy. I mean, Bernie Sanders is a unique individual in himself. I was attacking this different policy and trying to work both sides of the aisle with it, be bipartisan, while being someone that was socialist in the United States. And it was just so different, and it was such a challenge for me learning how to do this. But at the end of the program, I ended up winning Best Senator, and I was in a classroom of students that did go to Thomas Jefferson High School, with students that went to Maggie Walker, with students that came from all across the country, from the country of Georgia, for God's sake, in this classroom playing these senators. And I was, I think, 13 years old when they were all 16 to 18, and realizing that I could work in policy and being successful in it really spurred change. So when I came back home from this amazing experience, I sat down with my parents and I went, I don't want to go to Thomas Jefferson. I don't want to apply. I don't think I'm going to do math and science. And my parents, like the lovely, lovely human beings they are, went, okay. I mean, if you're not going to do math and science, do whatever you want, but be the best at it, and love what you do. And that is the whole, I mean, that's everything that my parents have stood for while raising me. And so I got back home, and my school went, we're opening student government. And I went, okay, I'm part of 0 clubs at this point, and I like being involved. Let's just run for school president. So I dyed my hair pink, pushed myself completely out of my comfort zone. For me, discomfort is a huge catalyst to growth. So what came with dyeing my hair pink was I was testing who I could be in what situations. So I grew really comfortable in uncomfortable situations. So anyway, I dyed my hair pink, ran for student government, ended up winning, meeting some of the best people of my life, which has been short, by the way. And we, founded Wi-Fi for the entire county. We sort of sat down and went, everything in Loudoun County is transitioning to the internet, and we don't have internet, and I don't know how this is working. And so between a meaningful partnership between young people and adults, we got together and went, we see a need, we're going to find the solution, we're going to fill this need. And we did that. And then after 8th grade, I went on to be freshman class president. And then from then on, I've been county chair of the Loudoun International Youth Leadership Summit. I've founded 2 nonprofits. I worked on 3 different campaigns on the presidential, congressional, and governor, so the statewide level. And it's always just been in my blood. I think from the moment that I picked up those popsicle sticks in the Maggie story, I was called bossy when I was younger. My kindergarten teacher didn't like me because I read to the class, because I would much rather be in front of the class leading where we were moving than behind the scenes. And it's just always been a part of me. And I think it took a little while to get there.
So I think an early experience understanding that, it's physics. For every action, there's a reaction. Mm-hmm. So you discovered that you could control somewhat the outcome of things. And so I love the fact that one thing has led to another and led to another, and you really don't see your age as limiting you in any way, and I think probably people my age see age as more limiting than someone your age. Mm-hmm. Like at this point, I think with the Parkland students having stepped up under very tragic circumstances, we are discovering that actually, yes, young people can lead a national movement. Like they can bring out thousands, hundreds of thousands of people to a specific place in a specific spot for a specific reason.
Yeah. And with that comes this belief in courage. So my mom and I were driving here because I can't drive because I'm 16, and although I can manage to speak to different senators on a weekly basis, I still haven't gotten my license, which is some ongoing joke between my friends and I. But we were driving here, and this kid was on an electric skateboard. at 30 miles per hour on the main road in Fairfax during rush hour on an electric skateboard. And my mom went, kids are brave. And it kind of devolved into this discussion of how much courage young people have. And it's funny because I tend to be a worrier. I tend to over-prepare for things and overanalyze everything. And it's worked in my favor in that it helps me meet new people and be able to judge a room. But what it means is that I'm fairly nervous for most things. And I've sort of learned that that level of nervousness is healthy nervous, and it's a good thing. And I think on the note of age being a limiting factor, it was limiting when I wanted to work at the State Department when I was 13 and realized that I wanted to maybe be a Foreign Service officer one day and wanted to be an ambassador, but I couldn't because I was 13. Or when I was, yelling about institutionalized and structural sexism in my 8th grade classroom, but I couldn't do anything real with where I was standing. I was just preaching to a room of kids who didn't know what I was saying. Age was a limiting factor for a while, but in all honesty, the wait has been worth it. And I think that giving young people the context to succeed at a young age, to experience different things, like run for office, attend different programs, to build that positive context is really valuable. But a certain portion of your life should be spent learning and recognizing what is your purpose in doing what you do rather than what is your position in doing what you do. Purpose over position is so much of what I stand for. And I really found myself lose some of my purpose earlier this year. With junior year of high school, I was doing so many different things and I sort of lost why I was doing it all. So I sat down over winter break, I took a step back and I went, here's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I love what I do. And I think that at any age, you can do that. And life is so much more unlearning than learning. And when you're older, you're going to be unlearning the tendency to limit yourself by age. And when you're younger, you're learning that there is no need really to limit yourself because.
I think that's a good point. You're right, because pushing the envelope of new things means you do have to unlearn. Mm-hmm. And the older you get, the harder it is to disassemble and dismantle things you've always believed in. Yeah. And to say, well, now I have to unlearn this thing I've always believed so that I can go forward and embrace something that's brand new. And I think young people do have an advantage. Mm-hmm. So when we come back from this break, we are going to be talking to Pooja about her work with this grassroots organization called Rise to Run. It is working with high school and college-age young women to get them more intrinsically involved in our political system. So join us.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Hey, Hard, what's this?
That's my resignation.
You're resigning.
Why?
You've been putting me under a lot of pressure lately. That's why I'm ready to quit.
Oh, I forgot. I'll do better. Please don't quit on me.
Don't let your heart quit on you. Get your uncontrolled high blood pressure to a healthy range before it's too late.
So you can't save money? That's easy as pie. Brown bagging lunch instead of going out. $6 save times 5 days a week times 10 years is $21,000. That's a lot of lettuce. Small changes today, big bucks tomorrow. Feedthepig.org.
Did you know kids who play outdoors have healthier lungs?
Totally.
I did. Did you know that boys that play with dolls make better husbands?
My son has lots of dolls. But did you know terry cloth diapers breathe better?
I did. Mm-hmm.
It's totally true.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Did you know that strollers have the right of way on the sidewalk?
Yes.
Yep, I did. Did you guys
Did you know that kids who eat breakfast have higher GPAs?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. That's actually what I was going to say.
Did you know babies should never touch silver? It's really bad for them.
I knew that.
Did you guys know that statistically friendly kids have more friends?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's obvious.
Did you know most people think they're using the right car seat for their kid, but they're not?
Parents who really know it all know for sure that their child is in the right seat at the right age and size. Visit safercar.gov/the right seat to make sure your child is protected.
I'm putting that on my blog.
I just put it in mine.
we're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed. Tonight we're talking about an organization called Rise to Run. And joining me is Pooja Tanjore, who is working here in Northern Virginia to try to further the mission of this organization. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Catherine.
So tell us a little bit about the background. How old is this organization? How did it start? Tell us a little bit about it.
Yep. So when we hit January, we're a little bit over a year old now. So the organization was started by Helen Brosnan and Eileen Sofer. So Helen Brosnan is a recent Georgetown graduate who partnered with Eileen Sofer in starting this organization to raise young progressive women to run for office. Because in all honesty, we need more young women to represent our experiences because they've lived our experiences. When you measure the number of women that come out of high school that want to run for office one day or who have any interest in going into politics, only about 19% of young women have any intention of doing anything in politics whatsoever, not just running for office. And that to me is completely appalling considering we make up 50% of the population.
But is part of that because up to this point, young people have felt jaded about the political system, like it didn't matter whether they voted, didn't matter what they did, because generally it was just going to be whatever it is. I mean, did Rise to Run come up after the Women's March? Was that pivotal moment where, I mean, a lot of organizations
came up after the
Women's March when all of a sudden women, without anybody being in charge, without registration, people came together, and they came together to show that they could stand in solidarity. Yes. And I think that's the first time, probably since the suffragists marched in 1913, that we saw women saying, oh no, absolutely, we are together in this.
Absolutely. So the 2016 Women's March was definitely a call to action for us. I'd like to think that some of the infrastructure had existed previously. So Helen Brosnan was great. She worked for Hillary for America, as did I. And so I assumed that this was always something that was in her plan, and it always was something that was in my plan. If someone didn't do it, I was going to go do it anyway. And I think that's so much of what a lot of women are believing was, if someone else doesn't do it, I'm going to do it. But if someone else does it, us as women, we're going to stand together and complement each other and support one another. And Rise to Run has been able to do that with organizations like She Should Run and Emily's List, in that we don't seek to, this isn't competition. We're not trying to monopolize some sort of industry. We're standing together in solidarity, making real change. To your point about voting, in all honesty, I'm a believer that civic engagement needs to be active. So voting, I am a huge sucker for democracy. I am obsessed with my US history classroom. I love everything. I take 3 history classes this year. I love everything about history and American democracy, and I've studied it endlessly. But what it does come down to is voting has stopped being an active form of engagement. For a lot of people, voting can now be conflated with the same voting that we do on Twitter polls, where you just click a number and you scroll by, and there, you've contributed to something. I'm not saying don't vote. By no means is that my message. I'm just saying voting should be done in conjecture with something much more active. Students being involved on a grassroots level, students being involved within their schools, students speaking up, saying something rather than just voting. And Rise to Run hits on that, because although we encourage voting, a lot of what we do is also raising young women to be passionate about these issues, to really understand where we come from, because a lot of us girls can't vote. I'm 16, I can't vote. I'm devastated about it. My friend asked me if I was voting tomorrow, and I called him mean because it was rude, because I want to vote so badly. But we're building up this anticipation to one day vote, to carry on our votes for the next how many ever years we live. But for now, there are other ways to make change, and we know that, which is what's going to make youth engagement sustainable, because we know there are other avenues in which you can make change that just aren't voting.
So when you talked about how you talked to your 8th grade class about institutionalized sexism, and you're like, but it's just kids talking to kids, but isn't that important in the context of, you may not be able to vote, but you're a voice within your school, you're a voice within Loudoun County, you're a voice among young people, students, that even though you may not be able to do things like vote, hearing young people talk to other young people, it seems to me it's more impactful than somebody standing at the front of a classroom who's older telling you this is what you should believe, or this is what you should understand, or this is what you should be doing.
Oh, absolutely. Kids should lead kids. Kids know what kids are about, and kids, in my experience, kids know all of the secrets. I think that people, when they're younger, figure out how the world works, and then they convince themselves that that's not how it works, and then they drop all of their ideology and revamp their values around a certain thing that they believe they should believe, and it gets really messy. But I think kids have all the secrets. But absolutely, I mean, when I was able to speak to this group of young people, people remember that presentation. People still talk about it. I mean, one of my friends, actually one of my closest friends, she mentioned that, you know, I had really improved in how I listened to people because I had made an effort to really see both sides of the issue, where people that were perpetuating institutionalized and structural sexism were coming from, as well as the people who were experiencing it. And that, when I was younger, was crazy to do. Why would you listen to the people perpetuating something? But in all reality, some people don't know that they're perpetuating something, and unless you listen to them, I mean, you get nowhere. And so when kids speak to kids, they are really critical of one another, and they help one another in honing their narrative and their story. And I mean, kids support other kids. High school, I mean, a lot of my teachers say that the real world is like high school. And I hope that's not true.
Well, everybody hopes it's not true, but
then
I've
it's
got
true.
news for you. There are cliques and there's statuses and there are, and it's just part of living in a community and being part of the world. So I wouldn't say it ever really goes away, but you grow in your maturity and your wisdom, and you generally handle it better.
Yeah. So, I mean, with that comes, though, high school spirit. So say the real world is like high school. You see this sort of extended metaphor of when we support our football teams, when we come out very Americanly, when we come out and support our baseball teams, we rally the troops because we want to win. You see kids supporting kids. And hopefully, when adulthood rolls around and somehow hits me in the face one day when I don't expect it to, I will also see, maybe not in the same way of supporting the same baseball team, but adults supporting adults. And when you foster that at a young age, when you let kids have conversations with one another in which they can be critical of one another, but they can also learn from one another, you see that sort of school spirit-esque energy come about. And a lot of these organizations, especially Rise to Run, is building off of that energy, of this idea that we all rally behind one big idea. And for Rise to Run, that's raising young women to run for office to change the world. Bold, progressive, next is what we stand for.
So let's hit on the progressive part. So Rise to Run is not claiming to be nonpartisan. There are some organizations that are, like She Should Run is nonpartisan. So this is not saying that. This is really hitting on the progressive issue. And so explain a little bit about how they're characterizing being progressive.
Absolutely. So there's no litmus test for being progressive. You don't have to identify as a Democrat. You don't have to identify as a Republican. You can not identify at all. You can be an independent. But if you're lifting up progressive values, thinking about things like halting the school-to-prison pipeline, thinking about things like, again, lifting up women's rights. They don't have to be female-focused issues, but they have to, there is a certain extent of they should be progressive, because what we are going to end up doing is raising young women to fight for these progressive ideals, talking about being pro-choice, women's right to choose, talking about everything that's never been talked about because people are too afraid to talk about it. We're taking that bold step and saying, listen, there's a hole, there's a void in the way that we view politics and the way we view the world. We should be bipartisan, like we should be talking to everyone. Everyone is part of this discussion. It is all inclusive, but we stand for progressive values, and we know what we stand for. And all our lives, we've been told, don't stand for that. People will fear you if you stand for that. It's controversial if you stand for that. Maybe so, but we know what we stand for because we believe that's how we fight the good fight.
And some of these issues really shouldn't be partisan issues. When you talk about things like the school-to-prison pipeline or just criminal justice reform, or that should not be a partisan issue. Education, pre-K, universal pre-K. How about,
which we just had that win in Loudon.
Yeah, right. Universal pre-K, full-day kindergarten. These shouldn't be partisan issues. But I do think in this polarization, this era of division, it's hard for people to listen to one another. It's hard to get your message past this I'm a this and you're a that, and therefore how we approach these issues is not the same. But when you talk about student loan debt relief, for instance,
let's talk about that.
Let's talk about it. But you would think these are issues like, let's talk about student loan debt and the fact that young people have mortgaged their future by trying to pay for their education right out of high school, and everybody should be concerned about that. Shouldn't be a partisan issue. But how do you get people to listen, and how do you lead young people as a group and cast off these labels to say we're better off working together.
Yeah, I mean, you do that by raising people that don't believe in that tribalism, that divisive nature of culture, and then put them in office. I mean, honestly, like, I wish I could tell you that we can sit here and lecture these very divisive and polarizing politicians all day long and tell them, be more bipartisan, compromise. But at the end of the day, these people know that where we live right now, the culture that we're living in, it's the age of specialization. You pick one thing and you are great at it. And for a lot of people, that means picking one thing and being super loud about it, which is not at all what it should mean. So I have faith in the government. I have so much faith in democracy and how we work. But what I've sort of lost faith in is lost causes. You can't help people that don't want to be helped, so you help those that do want to be helped, raise them to do good things and fight for everyone, and then you stick those people in office. And you teach them how to vote too, because when they vote for each other. And that's the better solution.
Do you think young people, and I think this is true of anybody, but do young people tend to be focused on more single issue sorts of things? Like, we've seen the Parklet students raise, gun violence prevention, student debt relief, universal health care, people who believe that we should have universal health care. Do young people come at the political engagement focused on a particular issue?
I'd like to think that there is a certain element of one specific issue draws people into being involved. But what it really does come down to is, yes, people do that. And I'm starting to realize that it's because as these issues get more and more complex, as they get more partisan, we're seeing people need to be so much more involved to make a slight dent, to make a slight change in an issue. Because if you don't throw your entire heart at it, your entire life at it, you can't make that change. And that's so unfortunate, because it leads to people not being multifaceted in what they care about, and leads to people believing that one issue is more important than the next. And that's not how it should be. This is super idealistic, but you can solve many, many problems at once. I mean, for God's sakes, I go to high school and I work in the grassroots all at the same time. I can solve two problems at once. They're very different problems. I mean, high school is its own tiger in itself.
Yes, it is. But you're right. You can do more than one thing at one time. Yes. Just if you are interested in equal rights for women, you can still care about student debt.
Yes.
You can still care about preventing gun violence.
And a lot of these issues they overlap. And that's where people miss out. People don't recognize that when you solve one problem, it slowly leads you to the next, and then the next, and it's all connected.
And when we come back, Pooja is going to tell us more about her observations, having worked with young people who are currently engaged in our political system here in Northern Virginia, specifically in Loudoun County, and particularly with Rise to Run.
A universal language, an expression of culture, of self. And now, thanks to Empowered Women International, a way for emerging and established immigrant and refugee artists and artisans to find hope to earn a living while enriching the lives of all of us. Empowered Women International, making a better America every day. For more information on Empowered Women International's educational programs, or to make a tax-free donation, contact cfrip at AOL.com.
You'd think it would be easy to tell which kids have trouble with their eyesight. But that's not always the case. Even though 1 in 4 children may have a vision problem, eye doctors tell us the symptoms aren't always so obvious. We do know that 80% of all childhood learning is visual. And without good vision, kids can have trouble learning to read and may fall behind in school. For clues on how to spot the real-life signs of childhood vision problems and what parents can do, visit checkyearly.com. A public service message from the Vision Council of America and Reading is Fundamental.
we're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed. We are talking about Rise to Run tonight with Pooja Tanjore. She is the Pilot Hub Coordinator here in Northern Virginia, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Catherine.
So we were talking about, engagement and people who are interested in different issues. Let's pivot a little bit to leadership opportunities, because you've stepped into this leadership opportunity, but if you're not constantly cultivating a bench of talent, when you go away, as you will be next year, when you go away, does it just all fall apart?
Right. So that was something I struggled with. For a very long time, being one of the only people in my school that sort of just was really loud about what she believed in, I didn't have a team. I had a support system. Everyone at my school was incredibly supporting, but I didn't have anyone to do what I did next. And that's not to say because I'm special or anything, it's just to say there was no one next.
Or nobody saw themselves. This is the problem with women in leadership too, is that women don't necessarily, of any age, don't necessarily see themselves as the next leader.
Yep. Yeah, women tend to have to be asked to be the next leader.
What is up with that?
What is up with that? It takes women like 7 or 8 attempts of being asked to run for office until they actually choose to do it. But that's a different conversation. So what it came down to was, I was sitting here, so how I had met Rise to Run was, I DM'd them on Twitter. So I'm a pretty professional person in that everything I've ever done has been application-based, interview-based, and the formal application system. But when it came to Rise to Run, I just wanted to say thank you. They came up on my Twitter feed one day, which is all very political, and I shot Helen Brosnan a message, and I said, I love what you're doing. At this time, I was 15 years old. I'm a 15-year-old from Northern Virginia. I want to run for Senate one day. What can I do for you? And within moments, Helen DM'd me back, and she said, thank you so much. Here's my number. We're setting up a call. And I went to the beach, and she gave me a call while I was at the beach, and we got talking, and I fell into this role of running Northern Virginia and Virginia for this fantastic organization. So the first step in that leadership process was we needed to launch. We needed people to know that we existed, that we were here. And so I spent 3 to 4 months toying with how do I launch an organization. I had never done anything like that before, especially not single-handedly. And that's where the problem was. I'd never done any of this single-handedly. When I thought that there wasn't a cultivated group of leaders behind me to take the next spot, I mean, I was wrong. There was a group of young people that were leaders that could take my spot, and I want them to eventually do that. I reached out, and last summer I had the privilege of going to governor's school for the humanities, and I met some of the most amazing human beings of my whole life. In that moment, in that month, we were all limitless. So I called them and I went, this is an opportunity. Please join. And I mean, like the very, very, very accomplished individuals that they are, they went, yeah, I mean, we'll help out in any way that we can. And so we, 2 months later, we had a great lineup of speakers. We had built an advisory board, we built off of a national advisory board. We built a local advisory board of like 10 different government officials and nonprofit heads. And we had spoken at multiple conferences, and I had taught a 6-hour-long lesson on civic engagement at the Virginia Civic Engagement Table's Democracy Summit. And that group of leaders just got cultivated on the way. And so what happens is you need to give young people places to succeed. But, and one of my favorite teachers says this all the time, actually this is how he prefaced his class, he went, I give you all a place to succeed, but with that means I give you a place to fail. Give young people a place to fail. I think 3 years ago, I was incredibly nervous for this giant Model UN conference, which now seems really trivial to think about. And I had texted my Secretary General and I went, I'm terrified, morbidly terrified. And he went, listen, you don't get to pick when your failures come about. If you fail, you fail. At least you got it out of your system. If you give young people a place to succeed and then you also give them a place to fail and you tell them, be okay with that, they're so much more at ease and they're so much happier to jump at the opportunity. there are great organizations that aren't just Rise to Run. The Loudoun International Youth Leadership Summit and Global Ambassadors is an organization that I have had the privilege of being county chair for this year. So I got to run the entire summit with an amazing, amazing team. Organizations like that entice young people, that show them, because what we do is we bring together 30 plus different countries from across the world, and we bring them into here, we bring them into DC, and we teach them how to solve global issues. And they go back home with these action plans and they solve global issues. We have a girl in South Africa who started a nonprofit about solving world hunger that has raised about $500,000 in the last 2 years.
Wow, that's amazing.
We're creating amazing change with one another. And when you entice young people with the opportunity of, here's a place to succeed, but here's also a place to fail, and that's totally okay, they'll get involved. And it's really about creating that context for young people. And sometimes you just have to jump headfirst into life. And I think young people are much more prone to doing that.
So tell us how you got, because you aren't going to be here next year, right? So you've got 2 more days of being a junior.
Yes.
Right, 2 more days of being a junior. Your senior year you're going to spend in Germany. So tell us a little bit about how that opportunity came about.
Right, so when application season rolls around and I start applying for different things for the summer, because I like to be busy. I applied for a couple different things, and amongst them was this organization called this program called the Congress Bundestag Youth Exchange. It's this organization that was created a couple years prior to the reunification of East and West Germany, and it's solely based around diplomacy between the United States and Germany. And so what they do is, we, from the United States, send 250 kids from across the nation. It's an incredibly competitive program with about 4% acceptance rate within each region. And the United States government just sort of puts them in Germany and says, here, you have a year to work on a diplomacy project. You have a year to, for me, learn how to speak German.
Right.
Be part of public German high school, integrate yourself into this society, and really learn what it is that other people are about. Get out of your bubble. And then Germany exchanges students as well. And so they get sent here, not to the same schools necessarily, but their job is similar. And really it's about fostering diplomacy. And it's so, what intrigued me about this program was it had that element of, we trust young people. We trust young people to foster these diplomatic relations between 2 countries that are global leaders. And relations between these 2 countries and their young people rest solely on these 250 kids. And that, to me, I mean, it was everything that I'd ever wanted to do. When I was 13, wanting to be an ambassador, I mean, this is an extension of that, or rather a start to that journey, hopefully. So I applied, not expecting anything. I'm someone that's very expect the worst, hope for the best type of person. I'm optimistic, wrote my essays, talked about working for Hillary Clinton, talked about everything that I had done in the grassroots. At this point, I hadn't even started Rise to Run. Rise to Run didn't exist at this point. So I applied anyway without talking about Rise to Run. I talked about my family, and a couple months later, with some complications in the application process, an acceptance came back. And now I guess I'm moving to Germany, and within 1 week, my whole life changed. But it's still odd because, I mean, the most interesting part is that young people anywhere you go are the same, because we all love to be engaged. And that is why I'm moving to Germany for a year, is to see that there is a language divide. There's a barrier between how we dress and what we all look like and where we go to school and how we've experienced our lives. But when it comes down to it, young people want to create change. And you'll see that in Germany, and you'll see that in this country. And I'm very excited for that.
Well, I'm very excited for you. So, and you're very adventurous. I mean, it takes a certain amount to acknowledge that there are things that make you nervous or things that make you hesitate. Embracing that is really important.
Jumping headfirst into life.
Right, because avoiding it means that you never put yourself out to where the opportunities are.
Exactly.
Right.
Why would you do that?
So now that this has come up, what happens with Rise to Run, and how, from now until you leave for Germany, are you going to try to get other people engaged in continuing the work you started and moving it forward and expanding it?
So the beautiful aspect of Rise to Run is that I was able to recruit seniors. The sad part is those seniors leave.
Right.
So it's not just me, it's actually a lot of transition for the whole organization. And I mean, on a national level, that's always happening when you're an organization. And so what a lot of the seniors are doing is they're actually taking Rise to Run with them to college. So they're expanding Rise to Run on their own. It's like bees pollinating flowers.
Oh,
they
wow.
move around.
Because they're all going to different colleges.
Exactly. And some are going to California and Chicago, and some are staying in Virginia, and wherever these people go, they're taking Rise to Run with them. So there's that element of transition. The other element is, what am I doing at this point? So I am going to be sort of aiding with Rise to Run. I'm not just going to leave the movement because I moved to another country that's against what I stand for. So I will be involved with Rise to Run from Germany, but a lot of the power is being decentralized. So right now we are in PwC, Loudoun, and Fairfax. And that's without any of the expansion that we're planning on doing soon. Whew, so much to do. But a lot of that power is devolving in that we're gonna have a head in Loudoun, a head in Fairfax, and a head in PwC. So when I started, my intention was just to tackle Loudoun. But within a couple of days, we were tackling Fairfax and PwC, and now I'm overseeing 150 girls in 18 different chapters, and it's gotten crazy. And so it was always my intention to decentralize who was the leader. And so, these powers, this ability to lead young women is being passed on to these 3 different very strong young women. And with them come the different chapter heads, the presidents at the schools, and then the leaders that are just part of the organization on a lower, like a more grassroots level. So the decentralization will come. Rise to Run will continue to exist. We will continue to kick butt, if not more butt. And we're going to keep expanding. And just because one person is moving to Germany doesn't mean the whole organization is falling apart.
Absolutely, and it shouldn't. But again, getting people to be as committed as you are, finding the people willing to tackle big. It's a big project. It's in addition to going to school, whether it's at college or it's at high school. You're taking on the responsibility of not just maintaining what you've done already, but trying to expand it and grow it so that you're moving into areas that have never heard of Rise to Run. And to your point, it's not just even the organization itself, it's the idea that young people can be engaged, should be engaged, because they make a difference.
Right. And Rise to Run is a platform for that. It's not, Rise to Run gave young people a place to come together, but it wasn't sort of the precursor to all of this. The precursor to the youth movement was youth standing up and doing something and saying, we need an organization like this to exist because we all need to, as a team, take on the world. And Rise to Run is just a platform to raise young women, to raise young people, to one day run for office for progressive values. And it's nothing more than just a platform that we're all using as a springboard, which is exactly what young people need, is a springboard to succeed.
I agree with that, because the thing is, at the age of 13 or as an 8th grader, you're going, I want to change the world, but where do you start and where do you go?
Absolutely.
So to your point, this really just is a springboard. It's like start here, and by starting here, the places you can go are really unlimited, right? Right. And so when we come back from our break, we are going to be talking with Pooja in more detail about what she's got planned in the next few weeks and few months before she heads off to Germany. And we'll find out too about how those who are interested can connect with Rise to Run and expand these efforts in your own school, in your own community, when you go back to college. So join us.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Wanted some matches and that's no good. Listen to Smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about 3,000 life. Nothing very nice. Holy smile. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Why don't you just wash your car at home?
When I wash my car, everything runs down the street and down into the storm drains. With all the chemicals in the soaps and waxes, the last thing I want to do is poison my own drinking water.
At least here, it's all contained and recycled on site.
That's why I also take my car in for oil changes instead of doing it myself. I might take a chance on spilling stuff.
You know what the best part is?
What?
More time to kick back and watch the game.
How far would you go to protect the planet?
I want you to build an ark.
Here we go. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Ow!
Maybe there's another way.
People, the flood is imminent!
Is it too much to ask for a little precipitation?
Go to fightglobalwarming.com to find out what you and your community can do to reduce global warming pollution.
Somewhere around the world, there are men and women of the armed forces risking their lives.
helping rebuild communities after natural disasters, collecting toys for needy children, tutoring kids in school. These are your sons and daughters who work to keep us safe, secure, and free. Dedicated men and women who put their country first.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to the final segment of Inside Scoop. I'm Catherine Reed, your host. We are talking with Pooja Tanjore today. She is with Rise to Run. While we were on our break, Pooja, we had someone posted a question. Anna from Sterling was asking if you're going to be at the upcoming Women's Summit, which is June 23rd at the Hyatt at Dulles.
Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about your role at the Women's Summit.
Yeah, so you just answered my question. Yes, I will be at the summit. I'm incredibly excited. I don't even know if Network Nova remembers this. When I started my first nonprofit, we were actually featured. We were at the Women's Summit. We had a table, and it's really interesting now because now I'm a panelist, and now I get to speak. I get to open the entire session, the entire breakout session on youth. So I'll be talking a little bit about the age of competence and sort of what that means. And I'm going to leave it at that to foreshadow. And I'll be talking a lot about my experiences and how young people can get involved and how young people are resources to nurture and not problems to solve. And that is a huge misconception right now, especially within academia, within schools, that young people need to be rewired a certain way to do things a certain way, and that when they're speaking with adults, when they're working with adults, they need to meet adults in their context. None of that, to me, none of that is true. Adults and young people should be building meaningful partnerships where they can meet each other in each other's contexts, and they can get together and truly solve problems in partnership, because without partnership, things fail. So I'll be talking a lot about that. Delegate Boysko will be running the panelist session that I'll be a part of. I believe I'm speaking similar to when Neera Tanden is speaking, who, by the way, is also my idol. That's another super crazy thing, is that my freshman year, I wanted to intern with the Center for American Progress, which is where Neera Tanden is. And she was my idol. I saw her on the news one day and I went, this is who I want to be, this is who I want to work with, and I'm gonna do it. And then they had age requirements for their internship, so I couldn't. I'm actually going to soon to be at an age where I am eligible to apply for the internship, which I will be doing. But it's crazy because the women at Network Nova and the Women's Summit actually put my name right next to hers in the program just because I love her. And it's crazy to me that she'll be speaking after me, and that I get to open up and work with her and meet her and take pictures with her. And even working in government, even having met Senator Tim Kaine and Senator Warner, and having met so many high-level officials, I still am a huge fangirl of every government official that I meet.
Let's talk a little bit about, you bring up an interesting point about Neera Tanden, who is brilliant and amazing.
Yes.
but let's talk about the need for diversity among women candidates, because there's an old axiom that if you can't see it, you can't be it. And you see somebody and you're like, I could be Neera Tanden.
Yes.
I could do that. I could do that job. And without more diverse women, I don't think little girls necessarily look around and say, I could be her, right?
Absolutely. I actually, and that's how I feel about Pramila J. Paul as well. She is an Indian American. I am also an Indian American. And she's doing exactly what it is that I want to do, and I love her. And that is so inspirational because it reminds me that, the biggest inhibiting factor to me when deciding whether I wanted to get involved with government or not was not, is this right? But it was, is this worth it? Is it worth it that I'm 5'1", an Indian American female who has to wear heels to every conference and speech that she goes to because if she doesn't, everyone has to look down? Is it worth it to run for office one day? Is it worth it to try and raise this money to fight the good fight like this? Because it's not, running for office is not the only way to be involved. There are many, many, many people out there that are doing this via the grassroots, via nonprofits, who are making change through that. And for me, I run 2 nonprofits. It's not that I'm not doing that, but it didn't feel right. I love the idea of getting to run for office one day. And because there are women out there that are doing it, that look like me, that have lived my experiences, that speak like I do, that know where I'm coming from and fight for me, I want to turn around and do the exact same thing for other young women that hopefully will look up to me one day. And that is, it keeps you going. When you feel like you've got the entire world on your shoulders, keeps you a little bit going.
Well, I think it's important. You know, there was a headline recently in the Richmond Times-Dispatch about the first female superintendent of Henrico County Schools. But I'm like, but it didn't have her name.
Oh, right.
Well, you know, it was more important that it's like she's the first female superintendent. I'm like, she doesn't have a name. Like, if it had been a man who'd gotten that job, it'd be like, Joe Smith is the new superintendent of Henrico County. I hope for a future where it's not the first Indian American woman, it's not the first lesbian, it's not the first, you know, it's kind of like, we need to get over this hurdle of it's the first, the first, so that we just get good people who look like the people who live in our country, and we can just drop all this sort of, we've got one, we've got a new one, or we've got
that's
the
enough.
first one.
And some people, and what happens with doing things like that, sensationalizing those firsts, or just making everything about the first rather than the identity and purpose of the person doing the thing, is that people think it'll fade away.
It's a novelty aspect.
Right.
Like, it's novel that.
Absolutely.
And I just think, no, it shouldn't be a novelty. It's like, it should be, let's talk about this woman and her credentials and the fact that she's just so awesome. Absolutely. And not the fact that, oh, and she's a woman and it's the first one we've ever had. But I just think, you know, one of these days, kids sitting in a kindergarten classroom today will go, why was it such a big deal?
Right.
Because they'll go, hasn't it always been this way? And of course, it hasn't always been this way.
And hopefully it won't be this way forever. And I think what comes with that is also people see these sensationalized headlines about the first whatever, and then they think, okay, well, I guess that's work done enough. And people just drop off the face of the earth. Like, the 2016 election happened. It was heartbreaking. I skipped school. I don't know about you, but I worked like almost 100 hours on that campaign as a freshman in high school.
It was devastating.
It was completely devastating. Actually, people still bring up the fact that I missed school, and it's funny because I want to say, okay, well, do that job. Do that job and get that invested in doing the right thing, and then see it fall to pieces. But people just sort of drop off the face of the earth, and that kind of momentum is not what you don't want to lose it. And so organizations like Rise to Run, She Should Run, Emily's List, these grassroots organizations, what they're really trying to do is give young people and everyone essentially a place to sustain their involvement and to see the exciting side of politics. And the thing is, with that dropping off of the face of the earth kind of mentality comes with decreasing voter rates. And it also comes with people only voting, because we can't just have people solely vote. If people vote and whoever your candidate is loses and you're not still fighting that fight, you're not holding that person accountable. You're not on the forefront of what this is. You're not on the forefront of the movement.
Well, you bring up another interesting thing that's unique to Virginia, and that is we have elections every
year.
So when you talk about sustaining momentum, well, it's like people go, oh, I vote in every election. What they mean is I vote for the president every 4 years, and that's not enough. Because
we have a primary too. Primaries are tomorrow.
That's right.
Everyone go vote.
That's right. Primaries, you heard it here. Primaries
are tomorrow.
And that's for a whole host of primaries.
If not voting for you, please vote for me, because I wish I could vote.
That's it. But we get voter fatigue here in Virginia for that reason. So we've got a primary, we've got the midterm elections in November. Then next year we've got school board, board of supervisors, the House, the Senate. You know, but it's every year and it's relentless. And so people are not necessarily. We just had in Fairfax City a city council election in May. That's municipal elections all across Virginia. There's still elections in May. I think that should go bye-bye, and we should but that's just me. But think about that for a minute, how Virginia is so unique to other places in trying to keep the momentum, the engagement, and the focus on all the time. There's never a down season. There's really never an off year.
Never. I mean, and sort of the history behind that is that elections are every year, and then the more local elections are every other year and don't coincide with the presidential, because it was a way to disenfranchise voters. And
absolutely.
We see that a lot right now too, because we see Virginia being one of the most gerrymandered states in the nation. But to your point, we have an election every year. And with that comes not just voter fatigue, but people just sort of forget.
It's true.
Because they're like, didn't I just vote yesterday?
Didn't we already have one of these?
Right, wasn't this like 5 minutes? I saw your pamphlet. Why are you doing, especially with delegate elections, you see people canvassing and you're like, weren't you at my house yesterday? Like, why are you here again? And I mean, the upside of that is Virginia is a great place for young activists to be, because the good thing for me is I will always fellow or
always
there's
have a
always
campaign.
a campaign
You want
to
a
work
campaign,
on.
come to Virginia.
Exactly.
We have something for you.
Exactly. And that's the upside. The downside is you do see declining voter turnout rates, and you do see young people voting less, because what comes with an election every year is young people are changing a lot. A lot of young people, especially between high school and college, are in the most transitional period of their lives. They don't know whether to change their address, whether to not change their address, how to vote where they are, where is their polling location, and on top of it, how to pass finals during election time. Like there's a lot of factors going on, and I think the same can be said for adults. Is life gets complicated.
I think you're right. I mean, I found this last governor's race, and we are one of only 2 states that have an off-year governor's race. But in 2017, when Ralph Northam was elected, it was the first time I have seen, and I'm at the polls every year in Fairfax City, families with young children in the rain, in the dark, in the cold, strollers, babies, kids picked up from daycare. And all the years I've been doing this, I've never seen that demographic turnout.
Yeah.
And that was like, whoa.
I mean, the hope is that with those families bringing those babies, that they're raising those young children to eventually go out and be civically engaged people, and like contribute to society as the constituents that they are. But what we're seeing a lot right now is, although there is this sort of faltering faith in our government, especially with the controversy and the tribalism, what we do have is people care. And people, so much more rests on these elections. And on top of it, people are redefining what it means to be a constituent. They are redefining the fact that maybe being a constituent means you're in a gerrymandered district and you're frustrated with that, or you're in a state that voted in a presidential the way you didn't want it to vote, or you're in a state where you hate the way the Electoral College is made up, or you hate the way that, you know, we sit in the House or the Senate and the General Assembly in general. That hatred, that sort of anger, is being channeled into a more positive context of being constituent is a good thing. We love that we can vote. We love that we can participate in democracy, because you know what? It gives us a place to channel that anger. It gives us a place, because when you're involved, when you're doing this for as long as someone like you has, or as long as my 16-year-old self has, it runs in your blood. Being involved, getting out there, doing these big things to change the world, couldn't imagine your life without it. And there are people that didn't know that this was their calling, but it's their calling. And as more people get involved, people are getting out there and they're responding.
Well, I'm going to say on behalf of Delegate Ken Plum, he's the most senior person in the House, that he has had ideas brought to him by high school students and young people that have turned into legislation.
Absolutely.
So we are going to leave it there. Thank you, Pooja, so much for being here
having me
and talking to us about what Rise to Run is doing, but also what young people can do, whether you're with that organization.
We can do anything.
You can do anything. And that's what we need to remember out there, ladies and gentlemen, is that young people can do anything. And we need to be paying attention, because sometimes they have great ideas and they have the energy, the focus, and the organization to make their voices heard. And so the next time a young person stops and wants to share an idea with you, here's my big idea from tonight. Stop and listen to them and ask them, how can I help you? Thanks for joining us.
Yay. Cool.